In 1961, the Cold War wasn't just cold, it was absolutely freezing. And right at the heart of it all was a single city, Berlin. It was a city divided, a symbol for a world literally split in two, and it became the stage for a superpower showdown that could have, well, ended everything.
So how did that happen? How did one city push the entire world right to the edge of nuclear war? That's the question we're digging into today. We're going to break down how a crisis over who could drive where, combined with a desperate move to stop people from leaving, escalated into American and Soviet tanks facing off, with all of our fates hanging in the balance. All right, let's get into it. So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the problem that started it all, this massive brain drain from East Germany. Then we'll get into the high-stakes political chess match between Kennedy and Khrushchev. After that, the building of the Berlin Wall itself. It's a wild story. Then the climax, tanks staring each other down at Checkpoint Charlie. And finally, how they managed to pull back from the abyss.
Okay, so to really get why a wall even became an option, you've got to understand the problem it was trying to solve. After World War II, Germany got carved up, but Berlin was special. It was this weird island deep inside East Germany where you could just walk from the communist East to the capitalist West. And believe me, people were doing just that.
I mean, just look at this number. 2.5 million people. Think about that. This wasn't a small leak. It was a full-on hemorrhage. And the key thing is, these weren't just random people. We're talking about doctors, engineers, teachers, intellectuals, the very people you need to build a country. This exodus was absolutely gutting the East German economy and, frankly, making the whole communist project look like a failure.
The Soviet leader himself, Nikita Khrushchev, called it what it was, a disastrous situation. From his point of view, you can see the panic setting in. Something had to give. The stability of East Germany, which was a critical buffer state for the USSR, was on the line. And that desperation is what lit the fuse for this whole crisis.
So, with East Germany basically bleeding out its best and brightest, Khrushchev decides he's had enough. He's going to force the issue. He takes this refugee problem and turns it into a full-blown superpower confrontation, throwing down an ultimatum that really puts the West on its back foot and, more importantly, tests the nerve of a brand new American president. And this didn't just pop up out of nowhere. He tried this before, back in '58, with an ultimatum that just fizzled out. Then a big summit in Paris completely fell apart after the Soviets shot down an American U-2 spy plane. So by the time Khrushchev finally meets the very young John F. Kennedy in Vienna in 1961, the tension is already thick enough to cut with a knife. And this is where things get really personal. You've got Kennedy, who's young, still finding his feet, and just coming off the absolute disaster of the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba. He desperately needs to look strong. Then you have Khrushchev, who sees this young guy and thinks, I can push him around. He wants to test him, maybe even break him. With goals like these, it's no surprise the summit was a total train wreck. Kennedy left feeling completely battered, and any hope for a diplomatic fix was gone. So after that disastrous summit, Kennedy knew he had to draw a line in the sand. He goes on national TV and delivers this powerful line. But it wasn't just talk. He immediately asked Congress for a huge boost in military funding, and even called up reserve troops. The message to Moscow couldn't have been clearer. We will fight for West Berlin. Okay, so diplomacy is dead. Military tensions are through the roof. What's next? Well, the Soviets and their East German allies decide on a truly radical and brutal solution. If you can't push the West out of Berlin, then you'll just have to wall them in and lock your own people behind it. And the sheer audacity of this is just, wow. Just 2 months before the wall goes up, the East German leader, Walter Ulbricht, is at a press conference and flat out denies any plan to build a wall. In fact, this was the first time the German word for wall, Mauer, was even really used in public like this. It was a bald-faced lie. The plans were already well underway. The whole thing was called Operation Rose, and it was carried out with chilling military precision. On a Saturday night, under the cover of darkness, thousands of East German troops moved in. They started tearing up streets, putting down concrete posts, and rolling out miles and miles of barbed wire. When Berliners woke up that Sunday morning, their city was gone. Families, friends, and a whole way of life had been severed overnight. So the wall is up, a brutal concrete fact. But instead of solving the problem, it just creates a brand new and honestly even more dangerous one. It set the stage for one of the most terrifying military standoffs in human history. And it all came down to this one little incident. See, after the war, all four powers, the US, Britain, France, and the Soviets, agreed that their military and diplomatic staff could move freely anywhere in Berlin. It was a core part of the agreement. So when East German guards tried to stop an American diplomat at Checkpoint Charlie to check his papers, they were breaking that deal. And the Americans, well, they weren't having it. They decided to push back. So when the US started using armed japes to escort their diplomats across the border, the Soviets sent this message. A warning that was crystal clear and absolutely chilling. And trust me, this was no bluff. This was the Soviet Union saying, if you escalate, we will escalate. The situation was spiraling from a border dispute into a direct military confrontation. And this is the image that everyone remembers. The one that could have been the start of World War III. 10 American tanks on one side of a white line in the middle of a street, 10 Soviet tanks on the other, 100 meters apart, engines running, cannons loaded with live rounds, for 16 hours. Just imagine the tension. One nervous soldier, one misunderstood order, and it all could have been over. Okay, so this is it, the absolute brink. You've got American and Soviet tanks literally staring each other down. Nobody wants a nuclear war, but nobody can afford to look weak and back down either. So, how do you solve this? How do you get out of this without starting a war?
Well, the answer wasn't going to come from a press conference. It happened in secret. There was this frantic, behind-the-scenes communication going on, a secret back channel that actually involved a GRU spy, that's Soviet military intelligence, acting as a go-between. Through this spy, Kennedy and Khrushchev hammered out a deal to de-escalate. It was a carefully choreographed withdrawal. One Soviet tank would pull back, then one American tank, and so on, until the street was empty.
And this quote from JFK, it just sums up the whole grim calculation, doesn't it? The West stood its ground, and it protected West Berlin. But in doing so, it had to accept the wall. A war had been avoided, sure, but the price was solidifying this horrible division that would scar Europe for almost 30 more years.
So let's just step back for a second. Why are we still talking about this today? What's the big takeaway? Well, for one, the Berlin Wall became the symbol of the Cold War. But more importantly, this crisis set the unwritten rules for the rest of the conflict. The West wouldn't try to roll back communism by force in the East, and in return, the Soviets wouldn't try to squeeze the West out of Berlin. It was a horribly brutal status quo, but it was a stable one. And critically, this entire crisis was basically a dress rehearsal for an even more terrifying showdown that was just 1 year away.
And that's the real cliffhanger, isn't it? The lessons learned on the tense streets of Berlin, the back channels, the brinksmanship, the fear, were about to be put to the ultimate test halfway across the world during the Cuban Missile Crisis. If you want to find out what happened next, you should definitely check out the next explainer in our Cold War playlist. And of course, if you like this kind of deep dive, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.